One day, two different groups of people came to try to pin Jesus into a trap. The Pharisees and the Herodians. So, the Pharisees were the leaders of the religion of Judaism in Jerusalem. Herodians were those who supported the Roman emperor's claim onto all of Israel, Jerusalem, the Holy Land. And so this is a spiritual, a religious, I would say religious actually, and a political, two groups that generally should be opposed to one another because they have different values, but they're coming to work together against the man of God, God himself, the true man of God. This is how the world works today too, by the way. First, let me add some context. So at the time of Jesus, the Roman Empire had invaded, taken by force the Holy Land, and were ruling it and occupying it. So the way the Roman Empire worked would, and this is why it was so successful for so long, is that it would invade a land that was near its own boundaries. It would take by force that land, and then it would occupy that land, and then they would charge a tax upon that land to continue the growth of the Roman Empire. Another big thing that helped the Roman Empire become so successful is that they would allow the local people to remain religious in their own sense. He would allow the religion of that land to stay about and not give any trouble. They didn't enforce any laws against religion. Later they eventually did, but at this time they did not. So the Romans had come, taken the Holy Land, allowed the Jews to remain living there, allowed them to practice their own religion, which the Pharisees and the Sadducees were the leaders of, and then they taxed the people. So the Jews of that time, who from their understanding were staying loyal to God, believed 100% that this was a direct violation of the second commandment, which is, you shall have no gods above me, idolatry. And so there were groups, political radical groups, who were Jewish. One of them was called the Zealots. And so what they believed was that all of Israel had become idolatrous by allowing this Roman Empire to occupy them, and they believed that having a political king that was not Jewish over their nation was idolatry. They saw that as worshiping somebody besides God. And so these groups were very, very, very much against the Roman Empire, and they were constantly training for and plotting a political uprising where they planned on retaking the Holy Land by force of arms. So these were, political radicals. The Roman Empire would have considered these terrorists, right? And are people in their own nation, in their own empire, who wish to uprise and take over. And there were several uprisings by these groups. It was called the Jewish and Roman Wars, none of which were successful. So, boom, that should have been their first hint. If it's God's will, it would have been done, right? But getting into that a little bit later. So this is the scene. So the Herodians were Jewish people who, and Roman, kind of a mix, who remained loyal to the taxes and believed that it was not a bad thing, that this is a good thing. The Pharisees' official stance should have been more like the Zealots, where they believed that this was idolatry and they did not believe in the tax. But you see these two groups working together to come to the true spirit, the true worship of the true living God, embodied in Jesus Christ. And so they come to him and they say, "Teacher, we know you are a man of integrity. You aren't swayed by men because you pay no attention to who they are, but you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Should we pay or shouldn't we?" Caesar being the emperor at the time. But Jesus knew their hypocrisy. "Why are you trying to trap me?" he asked. "Bring me a denarius and let me look at it." Their currency at the time, a coin. So they brought him the coin, and he asked them, "Whose portrait is this? And whose inscription?" "Caesar's," they replied. Now Jesus said something very, very, very interesting. He said, "Then Jesus said to him, 'Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's.'" And they were amazed at him. Why were they amazed? Jesus uses everything as an opportunity to teach all of mankind deep lessons that matter. Basically without saying so, this is what Jesus was saying to them. Why are you worried about paying taxes? What's that got to do with your soul? What has that got to do with your relationship with God, with me? Paying taxes or not paying taxes? Why are you bringing this rubbish to me? What has it got to do with anything? Caesar's inheritance is this world. He insists upon it. So why don't you let him have it? Let him have it. What's it to you? Is it uncomfortable? Well, you're not here to be comfortable. You're here to draw near me. And this is why the apostles rejoiced when they were being led to prison or being whipped. And they rejoiced in this because they saw that suffering, since it was suffering for closeness to God, in order to draw near to God. They rejoiced at the opportunity to get closer to God in that suffering. And so, you see, the Pharisees wouldn't understand this, right? Because they were not truly men of God. They were religious. They were not spiritually in tune with God. They didn't know God. They just read a lot about him, and they could recite you the Old Testament word for word. So, when Jesus says earlier, he says, man cannot serve two masters. He cannot serve both God and mammon, which is material wealth, money. And in most versions that say money, the M is capitalized. And because that is a god, and this is the time that we're still in, where most of us who don't worship God, we don't worship Baal, we don't worship Molech, we worship money. And this version's definition of success, that's our idolatry, right? And so the same thing is happening today. It's literally no different. How many of us who call ourselves Christians, how many of us get wrapped up and focused on politics? What business do we have saying things like, if the Democrats win, we're screwed? Or, thank God for Trump. What is this about? Is this life about political success? Can we worship God any less successfully as slaves than we can as free men? You see, this is the trick of the world. We see ungodly ideologies invading our land, right? We all know, anybody with a brain and any kind of heart for truth knows that the Constitution is the greatest document that man has ever created, uninspired by God, that is, it is the greatest political document that has ever been created, let's say that. And this country, besides Israel, is the only country that in its foundation acknowledged the one true living God. And so, especially Christians, we know this was a good thing, right? This was good. But ultimately, it is not our focus. As much as we are so happy that Trump got elected because he seems to be against these evil ideologies that we all know are evil, has his presidency turned the nation towards God? Have we as a nation, as a political entity, have we turned our faces back to God since he's become president? No. So what has he done besides make us a little more comfortable? This is the type of thing we start arguing about today. Taxes. Are these taxes, you see, the zealots were focused on the wrong thing. they were saying, well, first they were wrong in believing that having a political king, a political authority of man over them and paying taxes to him, they were wrong in thinking that was idolatry, because that's not worship. Worship fundamentally is your existential why. The reason you do things. That's what you worship, because that's what you serve. You know, if you're getting up every day to become rich and successful, then that's what you're serving. You're making sacrifices to do that. You know, this is a spiritual game. And so they are arguing about taxes. We shouldn't be paying taxes because it's against God. That's got nothing to do with anything. And really, if you dig into the why of that, really, it was just a discomfort and also a misunderstanding of worship. And we still do that today. We still don't understand what idolatry or worship really is. It takes some real honest searching to really understand what worship means, what serving means. It's to focus on the political strife is to focus only on the surface of a wound rather than the infection. It is to squabble about the surface level things. It is to treat a mental illness with a pill rather than get to the core and work it out the hard and long way. It's the exact same thing. Us as a whole, we do that. We focus on these things because it's easier, actually. It's easier to align ourselves with these political parties and say, I'm a Christian and a Republican and a Trump supporter. It's easier to do that than to actually go inside of yourself and do the real work. And so we focus on that. That's where we align ourselves with these wars that really just divide us. And instead of trying to convince people of the gospel, we spend our time trying to convince people that their evil ideology is wrong and that they need to be a Republican. You see, if the Constitution and democracy, if all of that was able to save the soul of a nation, why are we where we are now? As a nation, can you really safely say that America worships God as a nation? I don't even think the majority do. And even the church itself here in America, for the most part, is very lukewarm. And that's evidenced by our focus on politics. We are a lot more like zealots and Pharisees than we are like Christ. And think about it this way. If Jesus were alive today, do you really think he would call himself a Republican or a Democrat? Or a libertarian even? That's silly. That's very silly. He would look at you dead in your face and be like, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. What does that have to do with us? You know, and if you are able to step down off of your political high horse, you might just meet somebody down there who is opposite you. And if you speak about the love of God, instead of how you and your political party is correct and how they're all wrong and they're evil, if you take the time to try to work your way into a person's heart in that way, using the language of God, spiritual language, professing life and wisdom with spiritual truths, 1 Corinthians 2, 6 through 16. That's what speaking life is. This is why this political talk only causes division, but when I sit down with a person, whether they have their shirt tucked in and boots and call themselves a Republican, or whether they have blue hair and are calling themselves a very, very strong liberal, people lean into what I talk about regardless of what side of the political scale they're on. I speak to them like a person who matters, who's made in the image of God. And I talk to them about this void in us, about how this world convinces us to be selfish. And then what selfishness makes us careful with one another, because when when the most important thing in this world is our own personal happiness, well, every relationship we get into, we're not there to serve the other person. We're there to make our own lives better. And guess what kind of life you live with other people? Well, people are great to have around so long as they are also serving that same desire for your own happiness. But the moment they cause any suffering, or they get to be troublesome, or they show you their weakness, and it's hard on you, any person who causes hardship, well, they got to go. They got to go. Because they're no longer scratching the itch. And again, if there's nothing more important to us than our own personal desires, we may think we are not that shallow, but we are. We are not willing to go through the fire with a person because that relationship matters more to us, and we are not willing to serve one another in love. We are not willing to sacrifice for one another. You know, when you talk to people like this, and you really talk about what happens, the dialogue that is happening in every human heart, where do politics fit into that? Who cares? You know, who cares? Because anybody who really belongs to God, if you talk to them about the worldly things, guess what? You're going to fight. You're going to disagree with almost everybody. But if you go deeper with people and you speak about these spiritual matters that we all know and feel, and you do so in a way that you are laying bare your own heart and inviting the best of them forward, I will bet you so much that you will be surprised at how much greater this life becomes for yourself, but also how much more success you have with people you never thought you would. You never thought you'd find anything in common, but at the core, we're all made in the same image by the same God. We've got our differences, we are made unique, but at our very core, we are made in the image of one God, all of us. And there is a common ground there. You know, not everybody wants to talk about it, but what else are you going to talk about? Again, politics. If your eyes are focused on the eternal kingdom of God and ushering that in and drawing nearer to the eternal God that is not of this world, you're going to understand what that verse says. Who cares about a tax? Who cares? Pay it. Pay it. And you will look at verses in Psalms where it says, "We love your judgments, Lord." It's because even if I have to suffer among it, nothing changes what I'm here for. Regardless of what my country looks like, regardless of whether I'm in chains or free, regardless of what side of the political structure I align with, you know, this is the foolishness of the world. This is what the world tries to fool us into doing, is dividing us across these lines. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't vote or participate in enough of a way to participate. But don't worship it. Don't get attached to it. Don't put all your focus into it. Because ultimately, whoever belongs to the world is going to inherit that world. It's their inheritance, not yours. If you're a child of God, you are here to strip yourself of the world, let go of the world one finger at a time, to draw near to God. And so rejoice if the Democrats win, right? And our country goes down into the depths. Rejoice. It's all for a reason. And that reason is always to bring you closer to your God, no matter what happens. Don't get so worked up about this stuff. It's whatever. But that's what Jesus was saying to them. Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Give the world to those who belong to the world. It's their inheritance. Let them have it. You speak life. Speak about the love of God. Show the love of God. Because that's what leads to repentance, right? And never forget as well, Daniel 4:25. Speaking to Nebuchadnezzar, you will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like cattle and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over the kingdoms of the world, of men, and gives them to anyone he wishes. I might speak about this in a little bit greater depth. When I first found the Lord a couple years ago, I was halfway through a degree in psychology at a public university, and I had already been pretty mad about some of the stuff they were saying, but once I realized the depth of it and that those ideas and ideology, trust me, I'm speaking from experience here. I know what it's like to focus on the wrong thing. I call it my crusade, because in one week, I went to every single one of my professors and I demanded to know whether they personally believe in this gender identity junk or not, and I pressed them into a corner. And one in particular, well, I got shown the door by another one in particular told me that I'm just teaching what I'm told to teach. And I said, so your career matters more to you than the kids? That's what you're saying. You know, I was not easy. I was swinging my sword about. And I left one of those rooms, the last one I did it to, tears coming out of my face, went into one of the rooms at the library that you can rent out without renting it. For the first and only time I've done this, I closed my eyes, opened my Bible, stuck my finger on a verse, and it was that one, Daniel 4:25. Basically saying, keep acting like this, you will be driven away from people. You are dividing yourself with people at this. And don't forget, I put her and him and these professors that you think are so wrong, I put them there. I put them there. Perhaps for reasons that your pea-sized brain cannot comprehend. You don't know everything. You have the truth, but you don't know yet my ways. So trust me, nobody becomes king or president or professor or your boss at a job. Nobody gets there by accident. God put him there. And one more, Romans 13:1 says, everyone must submit yourself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, he who rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. Don't trip, potato chip. Let the political wheel turn. Let it do its thing, because it's not it doing its thing without God. God's working. Let him work. You know what you're supposed to do. And that is draw near to him and rejoice if the world makes you suffer for it. Rejoice when the world and the country that we love begins to go dark, because it's not happening on accident. Fight for the truth, but do it through love. Snatch people from the fire, but with mercy. That's what we fight with, mercy. Mercy and love. But, all right, love you guys.